Old Marley was dead to begin with. That's quite an opening if you want someone to read the story. Think about that. Old Marley was dead to begin with. What does that hint about the story to come to you? What does it suggest to you about the nature of this story? What was that? Yes, Collie. Marley was significant. Yeah, very. Anything else? What does it tell you? Marley was dead. We don't have to worry about him? Well, one would think. That's good, that's good. Well, there's a lot of hints in that opening, but I think it's a very interesting one. That's how Charles Dickens begins his story. Marley was dead to begin with. But then, immediately, Dickens beats his point to death. And this is what he says. There is no doubt whatever about that, about Marley being dead. And here's the proof, or here's the assurance. The register of his burial, apparently a book, right, was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. 5 people assuring us Marley's very dead. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change. For anything he put his hand to, old Marley was as dead as a doornail. First paragraph. There's 2 wonderful phrases I can't resist. The first one is good upon change. No one uses that phrase anymore. In Victorian England, change was actually gold. Next time someone asks you for change, I got none. Right? Change. Remember, he was making change. That meant he was counting up all his gold pieces. And so to say Scrooge's signature was good upon change basically means his signature was as good as gold. Because everything he put his hand to made him some more gold. Okay? This phrase you're familiar with, dead as a doornail, right? But do you know where it comes from? In centuries ago, doors were made with these very long iron nails. Okay? And the nail was driven through the wood, 2 pieces of wood, out the back side, so that it could be hammered down on the backside. Ed Mazza, what's a dead nail? A bent nail, right? Why is a bent nail called a dead nail? Can't use it anymore. People are like that. Once they're dead, they cannot fulfill their purpose. So old Marley was dead to begin with, dead as a doornail. That's pretty dead. Cold, harsh finality is where Dickens begins his story. Today we kind of use different language for that, right? It is what it is. But in that phrase, when we say it, I feel there's a sense of powerlessness, right? Futility. The world is what it is, period. Can't be changed. Done. Can no longer serve its purpose. Marley was dead as a doornail. It's so easy, especially in these hard times, for our own hearts to sink into that deep midwinter of a world far from God's will. And then we add to the burden, don't we? Link by link, forging our own chains by our own lack of doing God's will on earth as it is in heaven. World is going to hell in a handbasket. Was that the conversation at your table last Thursday? Some version thereof. Was a roast turkey the centerpiece at your table, or was it cynicism? Because if it was cynicism, what do you have to be thankful for? What do you have to be thankful for? Old Scrooge looks out over the hurting, suffering masses of Victorian England. And when he's asked to help relieve their pain, he says, "Are there no prisons? Workhouses? The treadmill? Orphanages? All those things that are supposed to keep them in their place. Are there no prisons?" Apparently, Marley was dead as a doornail. This is Scrooge's gospel. People deserve, right? People get what they deserve. Have you heard his voice lately? Yeah, Lois does. I hear it all the time. People without insurance shouldn't get sick. Ex-cons squandered their privilege of a job. Illegal aliens broke our laws, so it's their fault that their children are in cages. The homeless want to be out there, or else they'd get a job. You hear Scrooge? At least his gospel is alive and well. The poor, the immigrant, the refugees, the sick, the convicts, the bankrupt, those who suffer mental illness, those who live with AIDS, addicts, they all get what they deserve in the ways of our world. Old Marley was dead as a doornail, but apparently not as dead as a door knocker. Because Marley comes back from the dead to warn Scrooge about his ways, the consequences of the choices he is making about his life. Marley was dead as a doornail, and so was Yul Brynner. You remember? Yul Brynner began smoking at the age of 12. And he quit smoking 15 years before he was diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer. And in the last months of his life, Yul Brynner requested for the opportunity to make a public service announcement. You remember it, don't you? We all knew he had passed, and it was shocking. It was shocking when this was broadcast on all major networks just a few days after his death. He said, "Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke." If I could take back that smoking, we wouldn't be talking about any cancer. I'm convinced of that. Yul Brynner was our collective Marley, back from the dead to warn us about the consequences of our choices, the choices we make as stewards of God's gift of life. He was Marley. Who's your Marley? Who comes back to you in the deep conscience of your mind, warning you about the consequences of your choices, your ways? Who's Marley for you? Marley comes back to us throughout our lives, all kinds of times and places. Sometimes our hearts are ready to receive the warning. Other times, not so much. And we chalk Marley up like Scrooge to too much beer and pizza or something, right? In the book of Hebrews, it speaks of a great cloud of witnesses. Remember that? And usually we think of that as, some people who have lived perfect Christian lives, but the Apostle Paul says, No, these are people, normal people, who have had their chains redeemed. And you know this text, do not be deceived, God is not marked, you reap whatever you sow. Does it sound like Scrooge? It's not. This is not judgmental. It's a reality check. It's a reality check that reminds us we are accountable for these lives we've been given as a gift. And it's hope, because this is only the beginning, where we all begin as Marley, dead in our sin, in the sin of the world. And then Paul reminds us, yet while we were sinners, Christ died for us. So in God's economy of grace, grace comes first. We don't earn it. In God's economy of grace, we get Marleys. We get second chances. We get warnings. We get advice. We get talked to. And so I just want to leave you with this Advent season. Who's the Marley trying to get your attention? Trying to give you a new opportunity to turn it around? Who's your Marley? Pay attention to your door knockers. They have good news to share.